Good morning. Oh my gosh, Josh. First of all, how are you? As you notice, I have a sweater on. Yeah, it's cold out here, but are you still in 100 degrees?
95 so
Oh
far
my,
today, but I think the forecast is 108 today. Oh, it just popped up to 98. So it's getting hotter fast.
so we've been cold. I haven't even been able to sleep out on the deck. It's been too cold at night, like 40, 50.
Oh, that would be nice. I went out running this morning. I was just baking.
I don't know how you do it.
Stay
I could,
inside most of the time in air conditioning.
yeah, we have no air conditioning here. I've got the windows open and I probably could take the sweater out pretty soon, but earlier it was cold. So your idea was so helpful. I just want you to know. So
Oh, I'm
I've
so
got
glad.
a book. Look at the difference now. So I've done a
Ah,
couple versions of it and I've got the water links to the next. See, it keeps going. I've got
mhm.
it worked out. It worked out what you did. This is the one I think I did it on where I can wait, it's upside down. Yeah, it goes from here and then there's the water, it keeps going.
Uh-huh.
Going through the whole book. It's just, and I've got an idea that the journal pages, I'm going to have a pencil, just a thin line to show the continuation as you put in your own,
Uh-huh.
as you make this is a passport to place.
Hmm.
This is a passport to place and everything linked. See how that goes to that. It's great. It worked out so good. And I found the artist, a local artist who, because this is still very drafty. This is not the art I want, but it at
Right,
least
it's a sketch.
shows the sketch, right? It's better than the one I had that you saw last time.
Uh-huh.
And I've even fixed the words better, like on Heritage, just to show you everything is kind of in prose. Like for Heritage, it may be hard to see all that came to be by what is left behind. Cycles of culture take time to rewind. Can you see a through line from the timeline of hues? Some places have strong recordings, others only clues. Grateful for the heritage of the culture you preserve. So that's like on the culture, right?
Hmm.
For the heritage. But the point is it just defines the genre of heritage. So you could be in Paris or, Prescott or Tahoe. And anyway, so it's really weird. And then I've got another book, the Little Nature and Me book, where I've got the song built out into a book. So I'm going ballistic. And I decided this is the book I'm going to take to my talk, but this is the book I want to get hotels to back, like a Marriott or an REI to put in hotel rooms for a visitor. So anyway,
That's great.
you really helped me, Josh. I just want to kudos to Josh. So helpful. You guys are so lucky that he's here.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that's working out, and I'm so glad you found an artist for it there. So I'm excited to see the progress on that. Cool. Well, hey, welcome everybody else. Andy, Jeff, Judith. Good morning to you all. Well, let's see. I talked to Judith yesterday, and I thought you weren't going to make it today. Did you say you were going to make it today?
Um, all I said was I'm putting it in my calendar for the rest of the year, and um, it's been a hectic morning, which is why I look like crazy. But yeah, I'm here.
All right. Well, glad to have you. Andy and I spoke yesterday too, and good to see you again, Andy, and good to see you, Jeff. Well, all right. Well, today's another exciting day, and I want to share a book that I just started reading. You guys may have heard of this guy. He's been kind of blowing up on social media lately. He is an interesting looking gentleman. His name is Alex Hormozy. Is anybody familiar with Alex? Jeff, I see him nodding his hand. If you haven't heard, or his head, if you haven't heard of Alex Hormozy, when you see him, you'll be like, I'm really supposed to listen to anything this guy has to say. He wears a white tank top. He's always got one of those things on his nose to open his nostrils. He wears really short cutoff jean shorts, white socks pulled up, Crocs, and like a beat up ball cap. And he's got this big bushy hair and a huge black bushy beard. I mean, he looks like a combination woodcutter. He's really muscly too. So it's like he looks like a gym bro slash lumberman slash somebody who didn't bother to change after they got out of bed this morning and who hasn't shaved in about 2 years. Anyway, he's an interesting guy, but he's really good at small business marketing and sales and stuff. And he's got this new book out. I was going to show you the cover, but I'm looking at it on Audible and it's just like blank. Anyway, it's called $100 Million Leads. And it's a follow-up to another book that he came out with about a year or two ago called $100 Million Offers. And they're both fantastic short books, very practical advice about how to craft an offer and then how to get leads for it. And it may or may not apply to some of you, because if you're not running a business and selling something and trying to mass market something, then it's not perhaps directly relevant. Although in the sense that we're all writing books, writing a book is kind of like running a business. A book is a business in itself. And so there is something helpful here just in terms of crafting what the offer of your book is and then finding people to actually read your book. And so I think anybody who reads it will find something helpful, but it's also a great example of just two books that are very well written and well crafted. He said he did 19 versions of his latest book before he got the one that is out. So I'll put his name in the chat because it's kind of weird. And then the name of the book too. So, autocorrect. There we go. Hormozy. Alex Hormozy, $100 Million Leads. That's his new book. Anyway, it's a really good, short, quick read with a lot of helpful, practical advice. Just ignore the messenger, the author, and his appearance.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. I'm trying to get some people to read it and they're like, I can't read anything by this guy. I mean, just look at this guy. I'm like, ignore what he looks like. Just read the book. Trust me, it's good stuff.
Great.
Well, cool. Well, Jeff,
Thank you.
you've heard of him before. How did you first hear about him?
Yeah, I heard of him from another kind of coaching group I was in, because he does a lot of like he's big on YouTube, and so does a lot of videos on like sales strategies and stuff like that. So sort of like a pump up, like, hey, go watch this and then go like make some sales calls or something, that sort of a thing. But so that's where I first found him, and so I've been following him on LinkedIn. He's really solid on LinkedIn too, and so and a bunch of different channels. So anyway, so he's kind of interesting. I have the $100 Million Offers book. I haven't read it yet. But
really good.
Yeah.
You get through it all?
Anyway.
$100 Million Offers. Could you get?
I haven't read it yet. I have it, but I haven't read it. I did. He had like a free little like video course that I kind of went through, and that's like when I first started sort of following him. It was pretty quick. I mean, his whole deal now, because he launched a bunch of like gym businesses, and he was sort of like doing software and stuff to help gym owners run their stuff. That's how he got big eventually. And now he wants to buy up a bunch of businesses that are already like sort of doing well and then scale them. So he's into acquisition stuff now.
Yeah. So he owns acquisition.com, and he's just acquiring business. He said his businesses are doing a total of about 250 in revenue now, 250 million per year. So it's going pretty well for him. He seems to, he walks the walk, and he's telling people how he does what he does, how he's grown this business empire. So it's an interesting case study. And his stuff's good. I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, there's so many things I need to do with my website and this and that. And it's given me a big to-do list. Well, cool.
It's interesting because there are so many shoulds, that are out there. And I think he's actually cutting through the noise and saying, look at me.
Mhm.
And it's working.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a, well, nobody's wearing a 3-piece suit anymore, but there's still a lot of shoulds out there about, and I'm very excited to look at his stuff because I'm very curious. His message is clearly louder than his appearance, which is
Mhm.
also a message.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One part of the book that I especially enjoyed is he shares his first ever blog post. He reads it in the book, and it's pretty bad. And it's easy to see some of the mistakes he made in his first attempt to sell something. And I read that and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's terrible. I see that's terrible, but that's where he started from. So if that's where he started from and now he is where he is today, maybe there's still hope for me to grow something. And so I appreciate him going back and sharing where he started from and showing exactly how he built from there. Goes to show it's an iterative process. We learn one thing, we put it on to what we already know, and we go bit by bit and we get better and better. It's like working out or running or anything. You start somewhere, you start small, and then you add a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and eventually you're running marathons, or you start a business and you just grow a little bit here, a little bit there, and soon it's a big business. And with book writing too, you start out and it's hard, but you write a page and then another page and another page, and soon you have a book. All right. Well, who wants to go with questions or updates? Let us be your cheerleaders if you have a success that you want to share, or go ahead with questions. Jackie?
Matt McWilliams is this guy you're talking about, Alex Hormozy, so doesn't sound exactly like, but I was on a webinar with Matt McWilliams, whose big thing is affiliates and how to grow your book sales using affiliates and where to find them. Have you heard of him, or do you know much about his work?
I don't think I've heard of him. I'm looking him up right now just to see.
Matt McWilliams, and it's Passion to Profits, something. He's written a couple books, but I thought there was some good information on where to find affiliates, and that how you want to move your book is with affiliates. And he showed the data. I've got the webinar, actually. I could put it in the link that from the webinar he gave, and it shows the data on how he got through affiliates. There's a formula here how they get a piece of it, but they will move your book because it'll be tied to some other offering, a bigger offering. And so it's sort of that type of chain effect of creating a bigger web for the reach of your book. And he talked about how affiliates may not be direct. Like if your thing is about don't eat sugar, it could still be of interest to people that are wanting biohacks for running marathons, so don't cut off certain groups that you think may not be exactly in your niche. So anyway, I wondered about that. The other question I had, this new book, well, not new, but the book I'm working on, The Nature in Me, that I built from a song. I want to have where there's a page where you push and the song plays. And I wondered if you knew any publishers that do that, if you had a lead for somebody that knows how to put a song in a book where you push something and it plays, like a recording.
I don't. That's such a specialty niche thing, right? But I've seen those books. I've seen children's books or cards too, right? That you open a card and something plays or something, there's a button. So they're embedding a device in the page. I have no idea where to get started with that. It's such a niche thing, but you know what? Actually, maybe I know somebody who knows somebody.
All right.
I'm going to start an email to them right here. Let's see. Okay. I've just got it started, so I'll remember to do it later. But I know a guy who makes all sorts of crazy products in China, including he's done a number of books, and he might be one of those people who just happens to know how to do that. So let me reach out to him and see if he has any clue.
That'd be great. And here's the thing on, oh, I guess it's not making a link here. Let's see. Let me go to where it is and I can send that link.
I pasted the link to Matt McWilliams' main website there, but.
Okay, I think that's the, I don't know.
Webinar
Yeah,
registration.
so
Okay.
The thing, it may be the registration, but it says it's the replay of the webinar. So I don't know.
Got it.
But anyway, I thought it was some good information on you should start 6 months before you're ready to launch your book to build your affiliates with people that will actually aggressively sell your book to their market, because there is a connection through what they're trying to do. So I don't know. I just wondered if you knew that.
No, I don't know about him, but it's great. I mean, I looked at his website real quick and it looks, I mean, he focuses on authors and books, which is great. So that's definitely a great resource to have.
Yeah, it's all about just the selling. It's the selling part. I felt it was a little premature for me, but when he said you start 6 months before you're ready, I thought, well,
Yeah. Yeah. On a related note to that, getting affiliates to sell your book, that's a great idea. Also, you can get corporate sponsors for books. Like a corporation sometimes will essentially buy space in your book or agree to advertise your book because it's in their interest to push it out to their audience. And so there are a fair number of authors who'll get a corporate sponsor to put in some money to help you with your book and getting it produced in exchange for having a place in the book.
that's exactly what I'm looking for. And so where I'm torn is at what point in the book, like I showed you where I'm at with this one book, where does it need to be? Because I need financial help getting, once I get the artist, or even before the artist, getting it to the next step. So at what point, I mean, I don't think this one's good enough to show an REI or a corporate sponsor, or do they understand drafts, or better to wait till a final draft?
If you're pitching somebody you don't know, then wait until it's more polished. If you know somebody, then they'll trust you and understand that it's just a sketch at this point.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
And pitch the people you know first, because if you can go get 3 people that you know to sign on, then when you go to the 4th sponsor who maybe you don't know, then you can say, I've already got these 3 people signed up. You're the next person who was on my list. And then it makes it look like, oh, I'm just jumping on the train that everybody else is jumping on, rather than I'm the first person to sign up for this.
Ah, okay.
Most
Right.
people will give you honest feedback, hopefully. I have a quick question.
Yep.
It relates to what we're talking about. What about book proposals? Are you a fan or not a fan? Or
I'm a fan of writing book proposals, even if you're not going to get traditionally published. The only reason to write a book proposal is if you're going after a traditional publisher. But I think it's a great exercise for all authors to go through. It's not necessary, but I think it's very helpful. And there's a great book on this.
So there's a template for that?
Kind of. This book here is the Bible or the manual on how to write a book proposal. And it's great. A book proposal, there are different types of book proposals. A book proposal could be a 1-pager, or it can be a pretty extensive 100-page document. And a book proposal that you would submit to a Simon & Schuster, Penguin, HarperCollins, big publisher like that, it's a lot of work. People charge $25,000 to write one of these proposals for you if you hire a ghostwriter or a book proposal writer. So it's an expensive project if you want to get it professionally done. You do need a book proposal, not just to pitch the publisher, you need it to pitch the literary agent.
Right.
Because you need the literary agent to pitch the publisher. You don't go directly to publishers. You have to get an agent and go through an agent. So, but if you want to try to write your own book proposal, then this is definitely the book to check out. It's 5th edition. Yeah, there might be a 6th edition by this point. I think I got this about 2 years ago. So there's a chance there's a new version of it out there.
I think that book has been around since the 80s.
Yeah.
It sounds
so
really...
Sorry. So in self-publishing, what's the biggest value you find out of that? Just the exercise of like really making what this book is about concise?
Right, because it focuses, if you go through the exercise, you'll have a better idea of what book you should be working on and what you should be writing. Because going through the book proposal process forces you to answer questions like, who exactly is my audience? Why would they want this book? Is the title that I thought I should have really the title that this book needs? There are a lot of questions like that that are it will just force you to answer those and really think deeply about those questions, which will help you to write a better book.
The title is an issue. What do you suggest about? So I have a friend who's published several books. They did really well in a niche, food and health. And she had a book title that she loved, and the publisher said, no, this is the better title for sales.
Mm-hmm.
And she still doesn't like the title, but the book did well.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stuck in my head because I get attached to my titles.
Yes. I mean, titles are like children. We don't like to let them go, and we don't like other people to mess around with them.
Right.
And I mean, a good publisher is going to have very valuable advice about what the title should be. I was on the phone with a publisher yesterday. She runs a hybrid publishing agency. She's had it for, I think, about it's probably like 15 years. She's published 2,000 books. That experience of going through the publishing process 2,000 times, there's a lot of knowledge and expertise and value built up and seen what works and what doesn't work. Her firm has done, I think they have over 80 New York Times bestsellers that they've published. So, I mean, that kind of experience is so valuable. And as an author, you want to listen to that. At the same time, they could be wrong. And a good publisher will admit that. They'll say, I think this is going to do best. I could be wrong, but I think this is what will do best based on my experience. So we get really attached to titles. We should be open to changing it. Yeah. But I think it's good to take a stand for yourself sometimes and say, hey, I know my audience and I know how my audience is going to react to this. If you feel really certain about it, then fight for your title. But if you feel like the publisher has a good point, then be willing to take that advice if they can make a good case for it and explain why that title is going to work better, then that's worth listening to.
Hey, Josh, tell them what's wrong with my book title.
Show it to us.
Yep. So tell them what you told me, because it's good advice.
Stop telling use shoes out of a bus. Use shoes out of a
VW bus.
Yeah, backwards? I love it, actually. I can't see the subtitle, though.
3 simple steps to profitable and sustainable marketing. Stop selling used shoes at a VW bus.
You're going to have to remind me exactly what I said, because I'll have to I'm just going to start from scratch if I go again.
Yeah, go again.
Well, I think one of the things I said was that it's a negative sentence, right? It's stop doing this. Right. Whereas people gravitate more towards a positive message, do this rather than stop doing this. Now, there are all sorts of cases for going negative versus positive and doing it the other way. But generally speaking, all other things being equal, people gravitate towards a positive message rather than a negative message.
What about the humor in that? I think, isn't it?
There's definitely some humor there too, and humor is good. The other thing about the book title, though, and for me, this is the main thing, is it's not immediately obvious to me what the book delivers and who the book is written for. If I'm coming across that book title in a bookstore and I just see that, or I see it on Amazon, stop selling used sneakers out of a VW bus, I'm thinking, all right, is this a sales book? Is this an entrepreneurship book? Is it not even sales or entrepreneurship? I mean, it could be a parable or a metaphor for something totally unrelated to business or it could be a self-help book. I mean, there's so many things that title could represent. And for Andy, he's got a specific story that is from his life. And so for him, that title has a lot of meaning. But for a total stranger off the street, it doesn't have that context. Once they read his book, then they get the context. But the problem is, in order for them to buy it, they have to get something from the title without that context. And so I think that's one of the challenges that title has, is you have to write a title that works for people when they don't know anything about you or about your book. So to me, the title could be shorter, more concise, gets to the point, and really reaches out and grabs the right audience that Andy wrote that book for.
So
Did
I'm
that
curious.
cover it, Andy? Does that sound like what I said before?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
So I would pick that book up and I would look at it because I thought it was hilarious and I'd be curious. It would spark my curiosity enough for me to pick up the book and see what it's about and whether it's relevant to me. So
Right, but are you a creative?
I'm
You're
going to
a,
say,
you're a real creative person, right? So,
okay,
so
yeah.
here's the problem that I have. And then this is some insight, and Josh is absolutely right when he talks about that we fall in love with our stories. We fall in love with what we've experienced in life. And I say it very openly, because I do a lot of public speaking, and there's nothing I enjoy more than the sound of my own voice. And so that gets in the way. And I love being funny. And I am funny. My jokes, I've read lots of books on being funny. There's, do you talk funny? And I can give you a whole list. And I practice when I speak, so I am funny. But the problem is that's not why necessarily people are wanting to hear that. I mean, the funny part helps in the presentation, but there's got to be a point to it. And so my problem is I'm so in love with this story. And this is what I did when I was 21. I went door to door trying to sell used shoes to women and get them to come out to my van to sell them shoes, right? So it's a totally funny story, a little creepy. Could do it in 1991, but it makes the point of what you shouldn't do in business. And I love that story so much that I made it my title, when in actuality, it's about a business book about marketing. In fact, I think we're going to title it Atomic Fuel Marketing, because now that tells the consumer what it's about, right? Am I in line with that, Josh?
I think so. I mean, we don't want to make people guess too much what the book is about. And so, I mean, this is as obvious as it gets, right? How to write a book proposal. There's no question what you're getting from this book, right? It's very obvious. It's not an entertaining cover. There's no humor here. I mean, this is as vanilla, plain, functional as it possibly gets, right? This is, this book, Marketing Yourself. That's pretty clear too. And in case there's any doubt, there's a subtitle, How to Elevate Your Personal Platform to the Next Level. I mean, you know pretty well what you're getting out of that book. If you look at James Clear, his book, Atomic Habits, since Andy mentioned atomic, that made me think of that. Atomic Habits, you're getting a book about habits. With Hormozi's books, $100 million leads, $100 million offers. That the offers book is something about crafting an offer. The leads book is about how to get leads.
Right.
The title makes it very obvious in a split second what you're going to get from that book. And the way I like to think about this is, if you've got somebody out there who has a problem that's keeping them up at night, there's something in their heads, there are certain words they're saying to themselves. If I could just fix XYZ problem, if I could just do ABC, and they're repeating this to themselves all day long, every day for weeks, months, years. And you want to figure out exactly what those words are in their brain, and then make your title those words, so that when they see the title, they say, aha, that's it. That's the problem. And this book knows my problem. Therefore, it must have my solution, or the solution to my problem. So figuring out those words that are going around your reader's brain is really key to crafting the right title.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
That was super helpful.
And subtitle too, right? Like that's all included, and big on searchability and kind of going one level deeper and explaining that. Because for Annie's book, the main title doesn't tell you, but the subtitle does. Right. But so the main title is big. You at least need to make it clear who it's for to a degree.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with the subtitle for mine, trying to brainstorming all sorts of different iterations of that, and trying to, because the main title mostly tells you who it's for, but the subtitle should be, to me, is like, okay, this is what the book can do for you, kind of a thing. And
What's your book?
Yeah, let's hear your subtitles.
Yeah, so like the main title is called The Intentional Engineer. And so it's for engineers and tech professionals, and with that idea of like, how can they be more intentional about creating meaning and purpose in their life and their careers and what they're trying to build. And so there's elements of upgrading their mindsets and creating a vision and all that, and then some personal branding stuff and a bunch of other things. But I'm trying to wrestle with, okay, do I even talk about upgrading your mindsets, or to just make like upgrade your career and your life with purpose and meaning, how to, or the engineer's guide to, like all those little things that you can sort of turn the dial on, and those exact words, that's what I'm wrestling with. So I've got all sorts of different things that I'm playing with, but trying to dial that into what I really want it to be is tough.
I like the intentional engineer. I think that's great.
Me too. I think a guide is always good too. People always want, just tell me what to do. Give me the steps. So a guide implies that they're going to get the recipe for getting to where they want to go. It may be overused or dated at this point. I'm not sure, but sometimes I think a guide is
some subtitles say a guide, or some say how to insert whatever that result that they're looking for is.
But your special sauce for being an intentional engineer is what? What do you see as missing in the engineer mindset? That is it because they're just following us off a cliff, or
no? So that the word intentional is to be a creator and decide what you want and then go make that happen, rather than just being opportunistic or letting the market or your family or something else dictate where you're going in your life and career. Or people are really opportunistic or just kind of reacting to what's going on, instead of saying, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go make it happen. So that's it.
Yes, I like that. I mean, I see my daughter would probably read that book. She's a senior software engineer at Microsoft, and she's struggling with that intentionality. Like, what is the intent of Microsoft? Where are they trying to take this engineering, this brain wealth of brains that they have? Where are they trying to take it? Who are they profit sharing with? Are they profit sharing with the children, the future, the wildlife, the water, the marsh, or is it just profit sharing with stakeholders? Are we just still going on that, top up economy, or is there some economy involved? So I think this is a good point right now in our culture to take a pause and see if we need to pivot on what we're intending to build, because we can go on pretty unconsciously toward just what you're saying, just following the market, the directives. And my daughter's trying to push a change to make sure it's in service to the well-being of more than just one thing, the currency of money versus the currency of everything that we really need to live on, like air, water, food, planet, oxygen, atmosphere. And so, I think my daughter would read that book.
For some reason, the word proactive popped into my mind as you two were talking about it, like the intentional engineer, a proactive guide to
I like that.
Building the life you want, or
world we want to live in.
building a meaningful life. I mean, this could be fun. Just get out the flip charts.
I like the I like intentional because it's kind of the difference between, we have a puppy, we have a cockapoo. I mean, she's 3, but she's still like a puppy. And if we put a trail of food in front of her, she'll follow that trail of food wherever that trail of food goes. If we lay out dog food a foot apart, she'll just go from one piece of food to the next. And you contrast that with a mountain climber who looks at the top of a mountain and says, I want to get there. And then they chart a course to get to the top of the mountain. I mean, my dog, you could lead her off a cliff by just putting food in one step in front of her. She'd practically walk off a cliff following that path of food, because it's just the short term. It's one thing to the next. All she knows is what is right in front of her nose. Versus us as human beings, we want to be inspired by something big and we want to work for that goal. But if we're just following what's right in front of us, then we can be led all sorts of places that we don't necessarily want to go. To me, that's the difference between intentional and unintentional, or reactive versus intentional, is we end up where we want to go versus we end up somewhere we don't want to go. And we say, how in the world did I get here? Well, you got here by following whatever was in front of your nose, rather than
That's
seeing
how
the
we
big
got here.
goal far
Yeah.
away.
That's the culture we're in right now, and it's very dangerous. And yes, I agree. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we all do it to some extent, right? We're all partly reactive and we're all partly visionary and seeing the long term, but
Yeah.
often the short term wins over the long term.
In many ways, it's the book that I need, right? You know, and some of the things that I'm working on getting better at. So
Yeah.
it's fun.
Well,
That's
my father was an engineer, and I have a brother who's an engineer, and I mean, they're great people who have had successful careers, and I've worked with a lot of developers who are engineers, and it does seem sometimes like, I mean, engineers seem to be fascinated by solving problems, and if you put a problem in front of them, then they'll solve it. And they seem to be pretty happy just solving those problems. And it does seem like sometimes there is a tendency with engineers to solve the problem that's in front of their nose, rather than saying, where do I want to be 30 years from now? What am I trying to create? It's more just, hey, put problems in front of me and I'll solve them all day long.
Right.
It's the same in
Yeah.
legal. It's purely analytically driven. Here's the problem, here's the solution, what's the issue? And here's how we solve it. And that, I think that has led to a lot of the distress in the profession, which is why I do the work I do. And it sounds like, you know, Jeff is coming to it similarly.
There's
Yeah.
a great quote about this, and it was something to the effect that we're naturally driven to do whatever's easy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we avoid hard work, but we're more likely to do hard work if it's clearly laid out and it's easy for us to understand and do it. And so we might rather, I mean, digging a ditch is hard. I've done it before. It's really hard to dig ditches, especially if you're digging in clay and mud and stuff. That's really hard work to do. But if somebody says, hey, I need you to dig a ditch from here to there, it's really easy to understand what needs to be done and when it's done. Versus if somebody says, go write this book or go start this business, you're like, okay, I know what a book looks like when it's done, but I have no idea how to get there. And
Yeah.
I'm going to go dig the ditch because, well, yeah, it's hard, but it's easier to understand what I'm doing and know when I'm done than it is with the book. And so sometimes we go for that short term because it's just the easy thing that we know how to do right now, and it's clear and that feels good, versus wallowing in the confusion of trying to figure something out that's long term and not clear to us. Which is why your book's needed, I guess, Jeff, because your book is going to make it really clear to engineers how to get what they want in the long run, right?
Yes, it is.
But you were going to have it written by November, right?
Yeah, so the goal is today I will be done with my vomit draft. And next week is me and my wife doing as much editing as we can on it. And then I'm actually using Josh Wife's Bryn to edit it. And so after next week,
Nice.
I'll get it to her. So I've been
Wow.
writing frantically for the last few weeks and trying to put it together and rearrange it and structure the best I can. And then yeah, we'll get it out. So so the hope is we can get it edited in September and then go through some of the publishing stuff and as quickly as we can in October and get it out then.
And in
I
fact,
think I just heard your, sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead, Judith.
I was gonna say, I think I just heard your subtitle. Because didn't you just say getting the life you want? That Jeff is writing the book that so your proactive guide to getting the life you want or something like that, but it tells you what it is.
Let me share something that my wife told Jeff, because this will be helpful for all of you in the future, is that if you edit your own book first before you turn it over to an editor, you'll save a lot of time and money. So my wife just finished editing somebody's book, and when he handed it over to her, it was a real mess. And the thing is, it would have been easy for that author to go through his book really quickly and just clean up a lot of little things because he knew what was in his head. It would have been easy for him, but my wife didn't know what was in his head. And because it was such a mess, she had to go back and forth asking him, like, what did you mean here? And how do you want to say this here? This is not clear. And so he probably spent twice as much money as he needed to with my wife, and it took more time because of all the back and forth and all the corrections that had to be made that he could have probably done really quickly in like 2 or 3 hours. He could have just skimmed through and quickly corrected a bunch of things. So if you can go through and edit your book, at least do a rough pass before you turn it over to a professional editor, it will cut down dramatically on the time and expense of that editor. And so that's what my wife told Jeff. And so he and his wife are going to be editing it themselves before they turn it over to her. And it'll probably save them.
I hate doing that
$1,000.
personally. I think I maybe shared this last time when I was on the call. Like, I hate editing my stuff. Like when I write articles or blogs or whatever, I just sort of write and I don't even read it again. I just publish it. And that's sort of my way. And so it's what I've been doing the last few weeks is I've just sort of been writing, getting it out, occasionally going back and like restructuring things like, oh, that fits here better and whatnot, but I'm not reading through. So it's going to be a difficult task for me to go through that. My wife's pretty detail oriented and so she's going to be quite helpful through that too. And so anyway, but
and it's not that
you
it's not that you need to polish it and get it perfect. It's more like you do a quick skim and you just look for obvious things, because when you write it, especially if you haven't read it and you just wrote it out and it's done, when you go back and you read through it really quickly, even if you're just skimming it, there are things that are going to pop up and you'll be like, oh, wait a second, that makes no sense at all. I need to rewrite that sentence. Or, oh, gee, I actually started rewriting this sentence, but then I changed the tense in the last half and the first half totally doesn't match and it's obvious. Obvious things will pop up. I would just fix the obvious stuff. And wherever there's a question where you're like, do I use a semicolon or that, like, ignore that stuff. And if you don't notice it, don't worry about it. But just the obvious stuff, fixing that's the stuff that's harder for an editor to fix because it requires you to give your input on it. Technical stuff, the editor will take care of that. And Judith put a good suggestion in the chat there that reading out loud helps. A lot of people will recommend this, that before you publish a book, read through it out loud. Because when you read through it out loud, it sounds different. You realize, oh, that's an awkward sentence there. That just sounds weird. I need to reword that. And things that will not stand out to you when you just read it in your head will stand out when you read it out loud.
Yeah, if you've got a partner too, you can read it out loud to each other. So that is super awesome. Josh, you just mentioned something, and it can be a conversation for a whole other time, but I want to put this question out there. and that is tense. So I have a tendency to want to write in the second person plural, we, as opposed to you, because I feel like it's more inclusive. But I do find myself going back and forth, and I'm wondering if that's okay. Or
I wouldn't worry about it. I think
Yeah,
it's
just-
too nitpicky. I think it will slow you down from writing your book if you think too much about that type of thing. And so I would say at this point, just do whatever feels comfortable to you, whatever feels natural, just write it. And even if you're switching back and forth and you feel like, I know it needs to be one way or the other, just don't worry about that type of stuff, because the important thing is that you get your ideas out.
Yeah.
And then later you go back and you fix stuff like that. So that's a second, third, fourth edit type of thing.
Great, thank you.
It's
Those
just
are
it's just way too easy to get hung up on little technical things at the beginning, and then we don't get our ideas onto paper, and then we don't ever get the book done.
But in the essence of that, like, do you have a sense of what, like my sense is, and what I'm trying to do is I write that is I'm trying to do a lot more of the you, like trying to talk to a person who is the reader,
Mhm.
right? Rather than this existential we piece. But like, is there any wisdom in one way or the other generally? Like when you get to that final edit and you're making everything consistent there, like would an editor generally try and point you one way or the other?
It depends on the context. It depends what you're saying. It depends on the part of the book. There's no one size fits all rule here. So
Yeah.
it's, if I'm giving somebody advice or I'm trying to give somebody advice, I prefer to never say you should do this or you must do this, or I don't like using you at all. What I prefer to say is, I did it this way. This is what worked for me. Here's what I did, and then I saw these results. I prefer to, because I feel like I don't know. I think it's uncomfortable to say you should do this. It just feels too much like preaching or telling somebody what to do. I watched a YouTube video the other day. I got to track this down, but it was somebody put together a bunch of clips of interviewers with all sorts of different interviewers with different people. And it showed the interviews going well. And then it showed the interviewer giving advice to the person they were interviewing, and how it totally shifted the tone of the interview. And the people who were being interviewed kind of backed off, and you could tell that they like threw up a wall. Some of them just got openly offended. And I just thought it was so interesting to see the dynamic and the mood of those interviews changed as soon as the interviewer started saying, oh, you should do this. And people were just like, whoa, like, why are you telling me what to do? Why are you giving me advice? And so, but it's very different to say, oh, I did this once and this is what happened to me. I don't know if maybe that would work for you, type of thing. Even that's still giving advice, but it's couched a little bit differently than saying, oh, you should do this. Because the natural reaction to that is, you don't know me. You don't know my situation. Like, how dare you give me advice when you don't know anything about me? But when we say, I did this, then it's a humbler place to come from, to say, hey, it worked for me. Might be something to think about. Maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe it does, but it worked for me. So that's a situation where I prefer to use I. If I'm trying to say I'm on your side, then I'll use we, to say, hey, we're in this together. We're on the same side. When we do this type of thing, then this is what we see tends to happen. Obviously, I would use we if I were talking about me and my company or something. Here's what we did at my business. But I like to join myself together with the reader sometimes and say, like you're talking about engineers here. It makes me think of the book, The Mythical Man Month. Have you read that one or heard of it? It's a book about developers, but it's written by a developer, and it's really written for people who work with programmers and developers and engineers. And it's basically the idea that he talks a lot about the myth being that you can just throw a certain number of hours at a project and it gets done in that many hours. And if you put 2 engineers on it and you have twice as many hours, then it will get done twice as fast. And talks about all these myths about actually you get to this point where if you add another engineer, you actually get the work done slower once you reach this area of marginal returns. And so he talks a lot about things like that. Well, in that, if I were writing that type of book, then I would be writing not from the programmer's standpoint, but from the management or business owner standpoint. And I would be writing to a business owner. And so I would be saying things like, when we hire a developer, meaning I or you, the reader, as a business owner, when we hire a developer, we tend to see things like this. So there I would use a we to say, hey, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't really understand development or programming, but when we hire a developer, these things happen. And, you know, that's when I would use a we. So there are just all sorts of different situations. But again, that's the type of thing where I'd say, there's just so many different ways to do that. And there's no right and wrong. So I just wouldn't worry about it. And I would just try to get your ideas out in a way that at least the editor will understand what you mean. And then let the editor, who's the professional at that, say, oh, you know what, I think a we would be better than a you here. Or let the editor figure that stuff out and just don't worry about it. Or if you really want to understand it, great, go out there and you can Google this and you can find 10 blog posts with 10 different opinions about it, and then it will just thoroughly confuse you maybe, or maybe it will clarify things, but guaranteed there are a lot of different opinions about the right and wrong way to do this, and nobody's really right or wrong.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think the best way to write well is to do a lot of reading. When you do a lot of reading, then you just know what feels right because you've read so much that you write a sentence and you don't know why it's right. You just know that it just sounds right. And the only way to get to that point is to read a lot. And so I think the best writers are the best readers. And
Yeah, I think that's true. Not that I'm a great writer at this point still, but my wife made an observation the other day because she's started doing some of my edits, just kind of sort of looking things behind me as I'm writing. And she's read and edited my stuff since we were dating and in school and stuff, 12 years ago. And so she's seen my writing for years, and she's like, you're a whole lot better than you used to be. And partially because I've been writing a lot more, especially the last 4 years or so. But she's like, I also think it's just because you've been reading a lot more. And because I read, a whole lot more than I used to as well. And so I would agree with that the reading, consuming good books has helped with pacing and how I think about telling stories and stuff like that comparatively. Still a lot of work to do to be great, but it has improved.
yeah.
Hey, Josh, I have 1,069 views in my book.
Views? Sorry, what? Oh, use.
Yes.
Views. Okay.
Well, I mean, your book is on sales and marketing, and I was a corporate story coach for 10 years in a messaging company working with Fortune 100 companies. And our training was all you phrasing. It was all you phrasing. So it's hard for me because in presentations, we worked in highly commoditized spaces. And so there was the push was on differentiating. And so we would always put the buyer inside the story. We would get inside the buyer's story and we would look at how, so that they could see themselves winning with this solution. That's how I would set up, these presentations. So I'm so trained in you phrasing that I would probably say, yeah, Andy, that's what you do. And I struggle with it in my own book because some of the stuff, I think you go in and out of different persons, but I find myself sometimes irritated with books that are too much we. It feels assumptive. I don't feel included in it. But when someone says, well, when you do this, I go, wait, do I do that? I immediately connect with it. So I would, my training says go Andy, but I also think Josh made a good point. You float in and out because part of my bigger book that I'm writing is definitely my journey and my story, navigating this, this sustainable tourism. And then I'm talking with other people and what they've done, and then what you can do to move things forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not ever wrong to use the word you. I mean, there are definitely times where I will intentionally use you and say, make it so that I'm talking to them. If you do this, then you'll see this, 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 this.
Yes. Right.
So there are times, just like Jackie was saying, sometimes I want them to feel like I'm speaking to them and trying to have them put themselves into a situation. And so I wish there's a blog post I read years ago, and it was exactly about this thing of like when this guy uses you versus we or I. The trouble is it's really hard to Google that blog post and find it, because it's like when to use you, like it just doesn't this is where search engines kind of fall apart. But anyway, it was all about that, when he used the word you versus I or we, and he made some good points. I just can't remember exactly what they were, but
Well, it is a huge thing in messaging. You phrasing it, it's hands down. I watched it work.
yeah.
So Josh, I have a question. Is it okay if I ask?
Yeah.
Okay, so the pros and cons, I guess I'm kind of going to set up a dichotomy. I may go with a book title that has like if I say atomic fuel marketing, you're going to think of Atomic Habits. If I say rocket fuel marketing, you're going to think of the book Rocket Fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
That will give some familiarity to it. There's already some branding there. I'm not worried about the copyright thing, because, you know, I can write 7 Habits of Highly Successful Marketers, and there's no lawsuit because there's no way to copyright a title to a book. But what the downside is that I'm maybe writing some coattails, and maybe I don't want to offend the guy that wrote Rocket Fuel or the guy that wrote Atomic Habits, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's not necessarily really completely unique, but what's your thought on that?
I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, those guys are so wildly successful with their books. They don't have time to be annoyed by anybody. So I don't think they're going to take issue with it. The only way they would take issue with it, I would think it would have to be closer than either of those, because the word atomic's used in a lot of book titles, and the word fuel is used in a lot of book titles. In fact, there are probably 10 other books that say rocket fuel in the title somewhere, before they came out with rocket fuel. And there are probably other people saying Atomic Habits who were saying it before James Clear used it for his book. So I don't think atomic fuel is that bad. Now, from the other standpoint of what are people going to think when they see it, given that there are a lot of people, 10 million plus people, who have bought Atomic Habits and know that title, that's very well branded. And so that's something that I would take more seriously. Rocket Fuel is lesser known than Atomic Habits, but there are a fair number of people who know Rocket Fuel, especially in the small business industry that you're working in. So is that something that is going to hurt your sales or potentially help your sales? That's something to think about. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's something to consider.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm putting in a blog post from Neil Patel. This is the guy that wrote the blog post on when to use you specifically. I don't know where that post is, but I came across this other one, and it talks about removing weak words from your writing, and he has some really good tips in here. So it's another good thing to read if you want to self-edit your work as you go along. Welcome, Virginia. Virginia has the honor of tuning in from the longest distance here. She's in Switzerland. So what time is it there, Virginia?
Sorry?
What time is it there right now?
It's 8. 8
a.m.?
Let me just go out because we just put the kids to bed and I don't want to talk too loud.
You know, for Andy, I was just looking up the root word of marketing, and maybe there's a way to play on a new word and just, where business begins, like just a play on a word that nobody's using, Marcatus, where business begins. They go, what? Like something new, because people in marketing are always like, what? There's something new I could be missing out. But it's going back to the root of what moves business is marketing, and you know, the word's gotten dull because it's so overused. So maybe there's a spin-off or some version of the word that you could play on. Rather than give it more adjectives, maybe there's something inside that word you could play on that would get attention. And then, you know, it's the magic of marketing at the base or something, the root.
It's interesting though. I put in atomic marketing on Google and pulled up, there are at least 6 or 7 marketing agencies that are called some variation of atomic marketing.
So then you're also going to be pushing for them too. So,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, there's yeah, in anything with any type of explosive,
right.
That's,
I mean, we just can't get adjectives big enough anymore. So you kind of go back down to the soil of a root word. Just
Or launch. I mean,
just because somebody's using something doesn't mean you can't use it and make it your thing and own it. So
yeah, the biggest mistake, and this is a marketing guy talking here. Biggest mistake is decide that you're gonna make you're gonna open up a Peruvian Indian restaurant when a Peruvian Indian restaurant does not exist. And so you know, there's a whole book written about it. I forget what the book is written titled, but it's about this concept that don't go out there and try to do something completely brand new, because that bankruptcies are created from that.
Good
Find
point.
something that's already successful, that's already making lots of money, and swipe and deploy. When you start getting ultra creative, that's when you start heading into potential. There's a balance there, right? You know, but
Point. That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, Jeff says that could only work in Austin or Portland. That sounds about right.
yeah,
You can do anything in Portland and it might work.
that's right.
Yeah. I used to live in Austin, and yeah, all sorts of fusions that don't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean if I open it up, it's going to be successful. It just means
Yeah.
you're going to possibly fail. at it.
Only to the right audience, which is a place like that.
Yeah. Yeah. In Portland, they're willing to try anything once. Yeah. Well, Virginia, have you ever joined our book groups before? I mean,
A
we
long
got
time
back
ago,
in the
when
day.
when you just had created the Published Author Masterclass. But
Yeah.
it's been a while, because for me it's usually at 10 p.m. and I'm already in bed. So
Yeah. Yeah. So just to introduce Virginia, she's my co-author on my LinkedIn book. So she was involved with that, and we've known each other for a few years. So although we've never met in person.
no, never,
She
not
doesn't-
yet.
She doesn't come to
No.
Arizona and I don't go to Switzerland. So but one of these days we'll meet in the
Oh,
middle
right.
or something.
I'm sure.
We wish you were in Switzerland with your weather.
Yeah, yeah. I would trade Switzerland weather. I would take Switzerland weather over Arizona any day.
And it's been hot the last few days. We had like 30, 35 degrees streaks, and now it's finally raining a little bit, so it's cooling down. It's nice.
That is hot.
that's as hot as Arizona.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Well, cool. Well, all right. So we're finishing up the Q&A portion here. We're ready to go into our working session. Who's sticking around today to work together on stuff? Jeff, Jackie, Judith? All right.
I just popped out to say hello. I was curious to see if it was still running, but I don't have anything to work on.
All right. Are you thinking about writing another book someday, Virginia?
Yes, with my new business
That's right.
partners, like we are planning to. So basically, I'm writing a blog post, long form, every 2 weeks. And we already know it's going to be the base for our book about B2B marketing that's going to come out next year. I don't know when. But yeah. And I'm super excited. It's a great motivation also to be consistent at creating content, to know that it's going to become a even bigger piece. This is motivating.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great way to write a book. Write a bunch of blog posts and then put them together into your book. All right. Well, we're going to go on mute and we'll work. If you have things that come up that you want to talk about while we're doing our working session, then feel free. And bye, Virginia. Good to see you. And I'm going to go get a drink because I went running this morning and I'm so dehydrated and so thirsty. So I will be right back once I get a drink of water.